Welcome to this YSL tutorial. In this session we're going to teach you how to apply grouping to records in tables in reporting services. In this session we'll look at how to apply a group to a table by creating a parent group. We'll show you how to add subtotals to groups to see the average, sum, count, etc. We'll show you how to sort records effectively within groups. And then finally we'll do a couple of fancy things, show you how to create collapsible sections in a table with groups, which means the user can interact with it, and then how we can create nested groups as well. So let's get started. Most reports and reporting services will be based on a simple table like the one shown here. So you have several column headings, director name, film name and film runtime, and information listed on different rows below the headings. The aim of this exercise is to move on from the basic table layout into grouped tables. And we can start by looking at how to show a table that's grouped by the director name, where each director appears on a separate page. Scrolling to different pages shows you the other information. And once you've got that down, we can actually look at how to create slightly more fancy group tables, where you see all the information actually collapsed in a nested tree. And you can click on the expand symbol next to a director's name to show the information contained in a group. But the starting point for all these fancy things is still just a basic normal table, so let's do that first. So to start with, we've set up a basic empty report and we've created the data source and data set as normal. If we have a look in the report data window, we can see the data source and the data set, which contains the director's name, film name and running time in minutes. The next step is to start displaying information in a normal table. So if I head to the toolbox and double click the table tool, I can then start filling in the columns that I want. Now the approach I find works best is to start from the inside of the group and work your way outwards. So the outer part of the group is going to be the director's name information. For us, the inner part, the details, are going to show each film's name and the film's running time in minutes. That means I can get rid of this third empty unused column by right clicking at the top of it and choosing to delete columns, which will make the column width a little bit wider so we can see the information. So at that point we've just got a basic normal table. The next stage is to group that data by the field I want to group by. And I can do this using the Groups panel down at the bottom of the screen. Look in the Row Groups section and you'll find there's a Details item. If you right click onto that option, you'll find the ability to add a group. In this case is going to be a parent group, so the group that I will create, the directors will become parents of the films. If I select this option, I get a dialog box which allows me to set up the group settings. I choose from this drop down list which field I want to group the data on, and this is going to be the director's name. And it also makes sense, or at least it's easier to do at this point, to add a header and a footer to the group as well. If I click OK, I'll end up with a new column in the table containing the director's name information. And I don't know if you can see this from the left hand side of the table, there's a little bracket symbol that spans 3 rows of data. First of all, a blank grey box here representing the header row, a blank row at the bottom showing the footer row, and then the symbol for details, the dash 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 symbol representing the detail rows. These are the ones that will repeat within each group. So if I quickly preview this, I should already be able to see that the information is organised roughly the way that I want. All that remains now is to do a bit of tidying up and shifting things around. The first change that I'm going to make is to delete the header row for the entire table. I don't need to see these pieces of descriptive text at the very top. So I'm going to right click on the left hand edge of the table itself and choose to delete that row. The next thing is to make sure that I get my director's name, rather than sitting in a separate column, spanning the top of the details section. And the easiest way by far to do that is to hover the mouse over one of these blank cells, and just as you would normally, use the field selector to choose director name. So at the moment I've got the director's name in the table twice. So what I'm going to do is delete this unused third column, and now I have the information organised the way that I want. The next thing is to merge these two cells together. I can do this by clicking and dragging across those two cells, and then right click into any one of them and choose to merge cells. quick bit of formatting, quick bit of background colour and font colour, perhaps, just to make it stand out. And at this point, when I preview, the information looks significantly different. The next step, and this is a slightly awkward bit, is to insert a row in between the director's name and the details section, so that we can see the film name and film runtime minutes headers. If I go back to the design view and then select something inside the table, I can insert a row in reporting services in one of two ways. I can either right-click next to the director's name and insert a row below, or right-click next to the film name and insert a row above. Now, confusingly, the option that you choose to do those two things is significantly different. It's easiest if I right-click next to the director name. I can then choose to insert a row, and traditionally there are 4 options, but you can see there's only one way to insert a row below. I can't choose to insert a row outside of the group below. It must go inside the group below. So if I select that option, I'll get this new blank row with the ability to type in the headers that I want. I'm just going to undo that temporarily and show you what would happen if I inserted a row above next to the film name. Notice these detail symbols, the dash 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 next to the film name row. If I right click on that row and choose to insert a row, I've got 2 ways to insert a row above. I can either do it inside the group or outside the group. Now it's the context of the word group that's important here. Because I've right-clicked on a details row, the context of a group is the details. If I choose to insert a row inside the group, then what I end up with is an extra details row. I'll show you why that's a bad idea if I go back to the preview. Because what it means is that I get a blank row above every single film name. So that's clearly not the right choice. If I go back to the design view, and then I'm going to undo inserting that row. If I right-click next to the film name row again and choose to insert a row, this time I'll choose outside the group above. So it comes in without the detail symbol next to the row, so there's only one detail row still. If I preview this one, I can see that I get a blank row just at the top of the details section. So all I need to do now is head in and type in a couple of basic headers. So I'll have film name and film runtime. The next thing we'll do is add a subtotal to the bottom of each group, and to begin with we'll add the total of the running time in minutes. This is remarkably simple. All you need to do is click into the cell you want the total to appear in, and again use the column selector button and choose the field you'd like to use in the function. If I choose film runtime in minutes, I'll automatically apply the sum function to that field. If I look at the preview of the report, the bottom of each group now shows me the total running time in minutes for each director. If I head back to the design view, I'll show you that sum isn't the only function you're allowed to use. If you right-click onto the text box containing that function, there will be an option called expression. And if you select it, you'll display the expression builder dialog box showing you how that formula has been calculated. Now, without getting into too much detail here, we're going to go into a much more detail in a later video, but I can show you that if you want to see the list of other functions available, look in the bottom left hand corner of this dialog box. You can see there's a common functions folder. Now when you're using a grouping level in a table, you're aggregating data. There's a category here called aggregate. If you select that category, here now you'll see a list of all of the other useful functions you can use at this point. So we've just seen sum. Another useful one might be the AVG or average function. And you can simply overtype the sum function at the top of the dialog box with the new function you want to use. If I choose OK, and then choose to preview the report this time, you'll see that now we're seeing the average running time in minutes for each director. You could do with a little bit of tidying up, with a bit of formatting, but we can do that fairly easily as well. Head back to the design view, right click on the table cell again and choose text box properties. The number tab on the left hand side of the dialog box then allows you to specify a number format and choose how many decimal places to show. If I choose OK, and finally preview the report one more time, I'll end up with a nice, consistently formatted, average running time. The next thing I'd like to change about my table is the sorting of the records in it. You might have noticed already that when you apply a group to a table, it automatically sorts alphabetically by the grouped information. So the directors' names are already in alphabetical order. But inside each group, the individual films within it aren't sorted alphabetically. So that's what I'd like to change. I can do that by going back to the design view. Now, previously in another video, we've shown you to sort the results in a table. You can use the Tablix Properties dialog box. So you can right-click at the top left-hand corner of the table and choose Tablix Properties. And you'll find there's a sorting tab at the left-hand side. But confusingly, when you get here, it's actually empty. Although we've already seen that the column with the table is sorted by the director's name, there's no information that dictates that. Now, when you've got a grouped table, the Tablix Properties dialog box isn't really the best place to sort the table. So I'm going to cancel out of this one. And instead, I'm going to use the Groups panel down at the bottom. If I right-click on the director name group, I can choose to view its properties. And on the dialog box that appears there, there's an extra sorting tab. So if I select this tab, I can see why my table is automatically sorted in alphabetical order of director's name. I'm not going to change this. What I do want to do, however, is add some sorting to the details within each group. So again, I'm going to cancel out of the dialog box for the director group properties, and instead head to the details item in the row groups panel. If I right click on this item and choose group properties again, I can head to the sorting tab and choose to add a sort so that it sorts by film name in A to Z order. If I select OK, head back to the preview of the report, I should see now that my films are in the order I want. The next step is to change how the table presents all of the information to us. So if you remember from the preview right at the start of the video, we looked at two alternative options. We can either add a page break between each director group, and then you have to scroll between pages to see the other information, or you can do the fancy version where you have the little expandable nested tree. The page breaks are probably, as you'd imagine, slightly easier to deal with, so I'll show you that version first. If you go back to the design view of your report, adding a page break at the bottom of each group is all done in the Groups panel. If you right-click on the director name group again and choose Group Properties, you'll find there's a Page Breaks tab on the dialog box. If you select this one, you can simply choose to add a page break between each instance of a group. We'll ignore the other two tick boxes for now. If you choose OK and then preview the report, you'll simply see that each director's details now appear on an entirely separate page. That's really straightforward. Making the table work so that you can collapse and expand the details in each group is a little bit more effort, but to start with I'm going to head back to the design view. Then I'm going to remove the page breaks that I've just added, so I'm going to right click the director name, choose Group Properties, and on the Page Breaks tab, choose not to add a page break between each instance of a group, and then choose OK. The next step is to control how this row of data, the details row, is collapsed and expanded. And I know that I want to be able to select or click on the director name heading in order to collapse and expand a group. So it's quite important to know what this text box is actually called. The easiest way to do that is to select the text box in the table and then use the Properties window. And it will tell you that the name of this text box is cunningly called Director Name 1. Now that you know that piece of information, you can change another property of this details row. But you must do this from the Groups panel. If you select the details row here in the Groups panel, you'll see that the table actually does select something in the table as well. If I click on the word Director Name, you'll see that the table changes what it selects again. But selecting the details row in the table using the mouse is not the same as selecting the details row in the Groups panel. I can show you that actually if I make the properties window pinned in place. Have a look at the list of properties that you can see at the moment. This is with the details item selected down here. If I go to the table and select the same cell, apparently the same cell, I get a completely different set of properties. So it's important that I select the details item in the groups panel to expose the properties that I want. Now in the properties window, you might be displaying your properties either categorized or alphabetically. If they're categorized, then you'll find the two properties that you're interested in at the bottom of the list in the visibility section. I'm going to make these details row, change their hidden property to true. And then the toggle item is the item that you'd like to be able to click on to make the rows visible again. So if I click on the drop down arrow, I should find in here an option for director name 1, which as we know is the name of this text box. So at this point we're actually about halfway there. Let me show you what I mean by that. If you go to the preview this time, I will find that the details rows of my groups are hidden, and I have a plus symbol next to each director's name which I can expand the group with. However, I'm still getting the column headings and the subtotal row displayed. And we saw that in the end results we can actually hide all of those things. So to make that work, we need to go back to the design view again. Now annoyingly, the reason that we haven't done this yet is because the row groups panel isn't actually displaying all of the information that it could at this point. To expose all of the information you want to see, have a look in the drop down arrow at the top right hand corner of the groups panel. Click onto that option and you'll find there's one item you can select in there called advanced mode. And when I select that, I get a bunch of extra options available now in the groups panel. So as you can see, we've just modified the details item. Just above and just below the details item are two other rows that we want to hide. They're referred to as static rows. If I select the static row just above details in the groups panel, you can see that it highlights the first cell in the header row. So if I want to make that hidden true and make its toggle item director name 1, I can do that. And likewise for the static row at the bottom or below the details item, that refers to the footer row of the group. I can make that hidden equals true, try again, and I can make the toggle item for this director name 1 as well. Finally, when I go back to preview the report, I can see that all of the items within each director group are collapsed. And when I click on the plus symbol, it will expose everything. As a final thought for this video, now that you've seen how to group records by one column, it's not too difficult to work out how to apply multiple groups. So I've actually changed the dataset quickly for this report to include the country name. And what I'd like to do is use the country name as an outer group for the details that I've already created. So everything that I've done so far is absolutely valid. All I'm going to do is group all of this information by the country name. So if I right click on the director name group in the panel at the bottom of the screen and choose to add a group, which again will be a parent group, and this time I'm going to choose to group all of this information on the country name. I'll include a header and a footer as well, and then choose OK. And hopefully you can see that exactly the same thing happens now as it did when I first grouped by director name. I get an extra column containing the country name column, and I see an extra one of these bracket symbols on the left hand side, so I essentially have nested groups. I'm just going to do a couple of quick things to tidy up. As I did earlier on, I'd like to see the country name spanning the group rather than sitting in its own column. So I'm going to select country name again, merge those cells together, and then delete the initial first column. I think I might make the font size a little bit bigger for this particular column, and maybe make the background colour a little bit darker as well. While I'm here, this has been bugging me for the whole video. I should have done that much earlier on. If I want to have a quick look at the preview at this point, what I should see now is that Although my director's details are still grouped in exactly the same way I get to expand and collapse sections, I can also see that the director groups themselves are now stored inside groups for countries. I think one last thing I would probably do here is assign a page break at the bottom of the country group so that each country appears on its own separate page. So again, if I head back to the design view, and in the same way as I did earlier, I can right click the group heading, so this time it's the country name group, and choose group properties, and I can choose to add a page break between each instance of the group. If I choose OK, and then preview the report one more time, I can now see that each country occupies its own page, and still having the ability to expand and collapse the director groups. So there you go, there's a summary of how to group records in a table in reporting services. If you've enjoyed this training video, you can find many more online training resources at www.wiseowl.co.uk.